Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, big movies, small movies. So, Rob, in most movies, characters need to get from point A to point B.
Tell me about it.
Tonight, we're going to celebrate the vehicles they use for their journey. You and I have the honorable task of stocking the Rewind Video staff recommendation shelf. Each time we choose a selection of films, we adhere to a theme. This week's theme is vehicle performances.
It is.
Yeah. So, not just the characters, but the vehicles that they use in the movies, some of which kind of become a character, you might say.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I think vehicles are very capable of giving a compelling performance.
Yes. I think we've got a few that fit the bill this evening. As I was considering movies for this week's theme, I couldn't help but to feel that a few of them could have been called The Fast and the Furious, in spite of having nothing to do with that franchise.
It goes to show you how great of a name that is for a movie, because it's so universal.
We did steer clear of the, I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit, because the Fast and the Furious movies certainly have a place in the world, and so do the Mad Max movies. But yeah, we're not necessarily going down that path or that road, as it were, for our vehicle performance theme. Obviously, cars and trucks are certainly vehicles. I wanted to steer clear of just cars and trucks, but ultimately that's where I landed with my three films. However, I know that you've got at least one non-car or truck film in the mix.
Yeah, vehicles of all sorts are important in movies. Vehicles are very important. They can be important in stories.
Yeah.
They can be important in life. They're very useful. Vehicles are very useful.
Most of the people that come through our door walk through the door, but they arrived at Rewind Video in a vehicle.
Or on a vehicle, depending on what kind of vehicle it is. There's all kinds of vehicles. But yeah, I think vehicles are very important. I made sure to include a movie from the director that I think is the best director of vehicles of all time, and which I think is his best vehicle movie also. So maybe it could be the greatest vehicle movie of all time. But again, we're gonna get into this.
Well, yeah, we'll circle back on that because I have questions.
I want to answer these questions.
All right. Well, I have nothing more to say about the theme. Do you want to get us started with your first pick?
Let's motor along and move on to the first pick. I'm going to take us to the year of 1993, a movie called Judgment Night. This is directed by Stephen Hopkins. He directed Predator 2 and Nightmare on Elm Street 5.
All right.
Which, hey, that movie needed a director, too.
It did. Somebody had the helmet.
Yeah, here's the back of the box. 4 young friends, while taking a shortcut en route to a local boxing match, witness a brutal murder which leaves them running for their lives. Do you think Emilio Estevez's contract was like, on the back of the box, you got to call me young?
Well, he's not far removed from his Young Guns days.
That's true, yeah.
So
maybe that's why that movie was called that.
Yeah.
Tagline: Don't move, don't whisper, don't even breathe.
Oh boy.
So what is this movie? This movie it's Emilio Estevez and his friends Cuba Gooding Jr. and Jeremy Piven, along with his brother Stephen Dorff. They drive an RV to a boxing match in downtown Chicago. Which makes sense.
Right, yeah.
This is a movie mostly known for its soundtrack, which I'll touch on shortly.
Jeremy Piven in this movie looks older than he does when he joins the cast of Entourage like a decade later.
Didn't he have hair plugs or something? Like, I think his hairline maybe has changed.
Yeah, his hairline has definitely changed.
Yeah, he's a maniac. He plays maniacs.
He almost comes across as like a poor man's Paul Giamatti in this, a little bit.
Kind of. I never thought of it that way, but maybe a little bit.
Yeah, he definitely got himself together.
Yeah.
He joined the Entourage cast.
Yeah, got himself together is not what I would say about Jeremy Piven, but anyway, so...
Physically.
Yeah. As far as vehicles, though, the RV has always been, like, one of the things that I know this movie for. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a super dickhead move to take an RV to a boxing match. It's actually one that I would expect Jeremy Piven to make in real life. And every character he's ever played is the kind of guy that would basically steal an RV and take it to a boxing match. There's only 4 of these dudes. We don't need an RV. They could use a
No.
minivan. That would be tons of space. They could take a sedan.
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason for a special vehicle here.
It's not like they're going on a road trip either.
No.
They're coming back later tonight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Plus they're driving around all night getting fucking wasted.
Right.
Just like chugging booze, and they don't show up, but you know they're doing cocaine because Piven's there.
Oh, right. Absolutely.
So like there's no reason to be in this RV. Again, it's not even theirs. They basically, Piven kind of stole it. But then it does the classic thing where it gets stuck in an alleyway where it's between two buildings that are too close together.
Right.
And then it just explodes at some point, which is fucking great.
Yeah.
But it's just like this very conspicuous symbol of like suburban decadence driving through this so-called urban wasteland.
There's a Nintendo in the RV with like
yeah.
a duck hunt gun. And
The gun's there. It's got everything.
Yeah.
But it gives these guys this like sense of invincibility. And then, they're actually, for most of the movie, they're not even really in a bad neighborhood though.
No.
It's just a warehouse railroad district. Like there's nobody around. It's not like the corners are like loaded up with people selling drugs or, it's just abandoned. It's just like this. That could be just like a warehouse place during the day. Like we don't know.
It feels like it should be easier for them to get out of this small neighborhood than it apparently is. But they are trapped there.
Yeah, they're idiots too. Dennis Leary is the big heavy here, and that's a very 1993 choice for this role.
Oh, it really is. And I don't feel like he leans as hard into the Dennis Leary persona as he does in like The Ref, for instance.
Yeah.
But you're still getting a lot of Dennis Leary.
Well, he's Dennis Leary.
Yeah. Right.
Were you a fan of the No Cure for Cancer stuff that he did?
I'm not
the album that he put out.
Yeah. I listened to it at the time, but it was at the time when like everyone was listening to the Adam Sandler stand-up stuff. It was like part of that just like group of albums that people listen to.
Yeah, I think maybe I came to it earlier than you did. Maybe I don't remember. I remember like I was very young. I was in like junior high school at the oldest. Right. And I don't know, I thought it was brilliant, because you found out about him through MTV, I think, is, the thing. I didn't realize until like much later that he had just completely stolen Bill Hicks's act. To the point that Bill Hicks was like, they were friends up until that album came out. And he was like, dude.
Yeah, what have you done?
He's actually kind of hilarious as a criminal kingpin. Like unintentionally, of course.
Right. A little bit hard to believe, but nevertheless, it works.
I kind of like him in it.
Yeah.
I don't think his character, the guy he's playing, would not be who he is in this world.
Right.
He would own a jewelry shop or a wine bar. I don't think it's that Leary is miscast as this guy. I think this guy is miscast in the world.
That's fair.
I think maybe the jacket is the reason for that. I don't know. He's got that leather jacket that's just like a little bit too business guy-ish,
And wasn't he kind of known for his leather jacket? Like I seem to remember, like even in his stand-up, he wore leather jacket, similar leather
to Bill
jackets.
Hicks.
Yeah, right,
similar to Bill Hicks. Yes. But yeah, the soundtrack too. While we're talking about the mid '90s, that was the peak moment for soundtracks. I think.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that in the soundtracks episode, and I think the soundtrack gets a lot of blame for like propagating the rap rock bands that popped up, like Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
And maybe it deserves some of that blame, but this soundtrack is actually pretty awesome.
Oh my God, it's so good. Top to bottom, every track on this is just phenomenal. And the pairings, the bands that are matched up together to perform these songs, unexpected but never bad.
And the music isn't even that prevalent in the movie.
No.
You would never know. You would never pick it out necessarily. You can hear
it's like playing on stereos in cars that are like alongside the RV.
It's almost all diegetic. It's also like they also fit like 4 songs into the credits, I think.
Right.
But yeah, it's mostly in the background. Like once they get to the housing projects, they're playing the music in the apartments, and you can kind of hear it in the background, but it's barely noticeable.
Yeah.
But actually, the score is not that bad too. It's actually a well-scored movie as well.
Yeah, it's good. It works.
So yeah, this is it's a solid 3-star basic cable thriller.
Yeah.
It's an RV in the hood movie. It's an out of place but perfectly cast Mid-90s Dennis Leary, and it's got a killer rap rock soundtrack. So
speaking of the cast, it's got Peter Green, and he plays like the heavy that's on Dennis Leary's like squad of henchmen.
Yeah,
and I kept looking at him thinking like, why do I know this guy? Was he in one of the Die Hard movies? And so I looked him up, and he had a great run after Judgment Night. He went on to right after this, Pulp Fiction, The Mask, Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
He had some awesome movies on his resume.
He was in some like independent bangers. He was always kind of this guy, like the slimy criminal dude.
Yeah. Yeah, but nevertheless, great character actor and part of a great movie. So
yeah, absolutely. This definitely deserves to be on the shelf for vehicle performances.
I agree. Great way to kick us off. And this scene with the RV getting kind of caught in that alley is not the last time that we'll see a vehicle trying to fit into too narrow of a space.
It's a vehicle trope.
It is. Yeah, but it works.
Tropes exist for a reason.
Well, I'm gonna pick up where you left off. Go back in time a little bit to 1983 with Christine.
Ooh.
So back of the box synopsis for this: geeky student Arnie Cunningham falls for Christine, a rusty 1958 Plymouth Fury, and becomes obsessed with restoring the classic automobile to her former glory. As the car changes, so does Arnie, whose newfound confidence turns to arrogance behind the wheel of his exotic beauty. Arnie's girlfriend Lee and best friend Dennis reach out to him, only to be met by a fury like no other. Tagline: how do you kill something that shouldn't be alive?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So I'm starting things off with a Stephen King adaptation. In my opinion, Stephen King movies are somewhat of a mixed bag. There are definitely some good ones, a few duds.
I think just because there's so many, you're bound to get a lot of different kinds.
Yeah. We've covered at least one. We had Salem's Lot on the podcast before. I think this is decidedly in the former category. This is one of the good ones. Big reason for that is John Carpenter's direction. So King was pretty popular at the time of this movie coming out in 1983. This actually went into production before the book was even published.
Wow. Yeah. He was at that point where they would do that.
Yeah, they were ready to just greenlight anything that he had.
But it's still called in the title screen John Carpenter's Christine.
Right.
Which is I was like, wow, like that is a fucking huge huge power move.
It is. But Carpenter does some great things with this.
Oh, absolutely.
The cast is mostly full of unknowns. Harry Dean Stanton is in this. He plays a detective.
Always great.
Always great. We get John Stockwell, who plays Arnie's friend. And he kind of comes off as like an off-brand Kevin Bacon, which is funny because Kevin Bacon was attached to this and then needed to leave the project in order to go do Footloose. So they were like, let's get somebody that looks like Kevin Bacon. But the car is the real star of this movie. So Christine, as the back of the box mentions, is a 1958 Plymouth Fury. Apparently King chose this because he called it a forgotten car. I'm not sure what makes this car forgotten, but it isn't lacking in personality, both literally and figuratively.
I think it was a car maybe that was cool for a minute, and then they made so many of them, and nobody cared about it anymore, but had a place in his heart.
Yeah, that sounds right. So why did I choose this? When screenwriter Bill Phillips was asked to write the script about a haunted car, he thought it was a joke, but then got an early draft of the novel and realized there was something pretty special here. That's what I love about this. It would be easy for a horror movie about a killer car to wind up being a comedy. But this is genuinely creepy, and there are a few key reasons for that. Obviously, King delivers some great source material. But John Carpenter really does some great things with it, including bringing an original score to the table that I think makes this movie frightening.
I think there's a little bit of a sense of humor to it as well. I feel like the car has a sense of humor.
The car does that thing that we got again in the Michael Bay Transformers movies, where when the car has something to say, the radio comes on and you're hearing a song where the lyrics kind of inform the scene.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in this. But yeah, there is a sense of humor. There's obviously a personality to Christine. I mean, Arnie kind of treats this car like his girlfriend, and there's even some notes on when he was kind of developing the character. He wanted to make sure that when he touched the car, he was touching it like he would a woman.
Yeah.
And you get a vibe that the car is jealous of Arnie's actual girlfriend.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, I love the score here. We all know John Carpenter from his Halloween score, but to me, this score is very similar to what he did for The Thing, it really works. There isn't really a lot of over the top violence here, which I think helps keep this from being campy and cheesy. For quite a few of the kills, you don't really know if someone's behind the car or if it's driving itself. When the car does kill, though, there's some pretty haunting imagery. There's one particular kill where, the car's chasing down a kid on a deserted highway road and it's engulfed in flames.
Yeah.
And it's scary.
It's a pretty cool image also.
Yeah, yeah.
In typical Carpenter fashion.
Indeed. I also love that the effects in this movie really stand up today. So the car is able to repair itself, and there are a few scenes where we see it just kind of it's totaled and it builds itself back into shape.
Kind of like a Transformer.
But all these effects were done practically. Like they did some work where there was like they suctioned the car inward and then reversed the footage so it looked like it was kind of coming back.
Yeah, it was kind of like a werewolf scene with a car.
Yeah, yeah. But it really works. I think, it's even better than it would have been if this was done in CG. It looks authentic and looks real. Speaking of things that look good, this movie actually just got a 4K transfer, and it looks stunning. I think you wouldn't be blamed for thinking this movie came out in 2023, but was just set in the 1980s because it looks really good.
So got a lot of those 4K discs on the shelf.
Indeed we do. As any good video store should.
Of course.
So critical response here was pretty positive. Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars. It averages a 3.5 on Letterboxd. And I want to call out the 2 most popular reviews for Christine on the site. So user Karsten said of his 4-star review, so he definitely fucked the car, no?
I think that's pretty obvious.
The next review by a guy named James with his 3.5-star review said, Arnie, just fuck the car already.
and of course, those are the 2 most popular.
Yes. Yeah, everybody loved those reviews. So
my dream Hollywood project right now is John Carpenter's Knight Rider. And everybody says to me, like, well, what about Christine? And I'm like, it's not the same thing. This is, Knight Rider is not the same thing as Christine. Christine is a car that has been, possessed by a ghost. We don't actually know, like in a lot of Stephen King stories, we don't know.
Which is better. It's better that we don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Whereas John Carpenter's Knight Rider, I think, would be, like, imagine that, like, the story of Michael Knight, but in the world of They Live.
Yes.
Something like that, where he's just going from town to town, and there's a semi truck with an office in the back.
Right.
Office / place where they fix the car.
Yeah.
But it's not the same thing, everybody.
No, definitely not. This isn't actually even Stephen King's only haunted vehicle movie, because he's got Maximum Overdrive, which I toyed with bringing to the shelf, but this is decidedly the better haunted car movie.
Maximum Overdrive is a piece of shit. He directed that movie.
Yeah.
And he was on so much cocaine, he says he doesn't remember making it.
I could believe that.
For sure. The last time I saw it was a couple years ago, and the first half of that movie is, like, not bad. And you're like, what is everyone talking about? Like, this isn't that bad. Right. And then the last 45 minutes is just 18-wheelers driving around in a circle, like, literally that's all that's happening, and then the movie just kind of ends. it's
and for that reason, you won't find Maximum Overdrive on the staff recommendation.
Yeah. It is a nice artifact of Stephen King's career, but it's a piece of shit.
It is. We're getting a Christine remake, which I don't think we need. Like I said, the 83 version totally holds up, but inevitably, Hollywood goes back to the well. And
Stephen King is also notorious for just kind of trying ideas over and over again until they work. Yeah. And I think he got the vehicle thing right on Christine.
I think he did.
I'm not sure he's done anything like that since.
No. But he's not afraid to make things haunted.
When did Maximum Overdrive come out?
Oh boy, it was before this.
It's a piece of shit.
Yeah,
Don't watch it.
It's not worth it. You know what? It's actually it's 86.
Okay.
86. So he should have stopped with Christine.
He should have stopped. I think that vehicle was already in motion.
Indeed.
I'm going to be taking us up to the year 2010. We're going to be going into the world of trains. Although that's not the only vehicle involved here, but we're going to go to Tony Scott's classic, Unstoppable.
Love trains, love Tony Scott. Love when they come together.
Yeah, and here they are together. This movie stars Denzel Washington and Chris Pine. Here's the back of the box. With an unmanned, half-mile-long freight train barreling toward a city, a veteran engineer and a young conductor race against the clock to prevent a catastrophe. Tagline, 1 million tons, 100,000 lives, 100 minutes.
Cool.
It's actually 98 minutes, but I'll give that to them. They can have it. That's a great tagline. That's all this movie is about. This is the runaway train movie. It's loosely based on a true story.
Yeah.
It happened in Ohio.
Yeah.
They picked Pennsylvania for the movie, but in real life it was Ohio. I don't think things quite happened this way. Apparently, the how they lost the train was very similar, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, from what I understand. But I think Tony Scott is an absolute master of vehicular cinema. I don't think this is his best movie, in my opinion, but I think this is the most Tony Scott movie of all time.
Wow, interesting. Boy, we've talked a lot about Tony Scott here at Rewind Video, and Crimson Tide for me still edges this one out, but I don't disagree.
Crimson Tide is ahead of this one. I don't think this is the best Tony Scott movie. I think it's the most Tony Scott movie.
Okay.
I think this is where his style, the performances, the storytelling techniques, like they're all at their sharpest point in this movie. I think he had kind of like fully realized what the Tony Scott style is.
Yeah.
And after taking decades to figure it out, he had just nailed it.
Gotcha. Okay.
But he's done a lot of vehicle work. Days of Thunder, Crimson Tide, of course, Top Gun, just to name a few. In this movie, the performances are typically amazing. Obviously, Denzel and Chris Pine, I think, are like really appropriate here.
We get Denzel in like Papa Denzel mode. He's kind of fatherly figure, a little aged, but it works.
You don't think of Denzel as like the railroader that's about to retire guy. And, he doesn't have to change the Denzel thing that much, but it still works.
Yeah.
And even Chris Pine, I think, is really believable here. Like, it's like, right up to the edge. You're like, it's still Chris Pine.
Yeah.
As like this small town railroad guy. But, I mean, his performance really works.
Yeah.
Rosario Dawson is like the commanding force at the command center, both in the movie and of the movie.
Yeah.
She's like in the middle. She's like, all right, now we're going to go here. And then that's where we go.
Yeah.
That's what happens. But what I love about this, just like every other Tony Scott movie, is the bit players. And I'm not even talking about like Ned. Specifically right now, I want to talk about the waitress where Ned's having breakfast.
Oh, okay.
She speaks maybe 3 syllables. Ned's sitting there telling her this story about like, oh, this is how much and but and she might say like, yep, okay, and just the way her face looks. We get to see her for about 5 seconds. We know exactly how she feels about Ned. We know exactly how often he eats breakfast there. We know how often she's heard this fucking story.
Yep.
And I think that was just like such a moment. I'm like, man, that's what Tony Scott always gets right.
Yes.
That waitress, like. 100% I believe that was a waitress in Stanton, PA, or wherever the fuck they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's just like such a great example of that.
We also get Ethan Suplee, who's great in this.
Oh, man, yeah.
He's so good.
He plays an idiot so well.
Yeah. There's no better idiot to cast than Ethan Suplee, and he does it here.
He definitely does.
Yeah.
But I'm not the first person to point this out, but this is a monster movie. This is the 777 train is a monster. The train is a threat from the very first shots of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, that is not kept a secret. We know what's happening. The movie is fully aware that the audience knows what's up. They know what they're in for.
Yeah.
The marketing was, this is a runaway train movie.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what it is. That's what people came for.
Yeah.
I do think this train has a Christine-like control over itself.
Interesting.
Just a little bit, because when Ethan Suplee jumps off the train and then that lever comes down,
yeah,
it doesn't seem like it should just pop down like that, right?
yeah. So I can buy that.
I don't think this train is fully sentient, but I think it does have an agenda.
Yes.
And I think
it wants to go fast.
Yeah, and I think when Ethan Suplee jumps out of the train, I think that the train kind of sees its chance and makes a run for it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it has full control over itself, but I think it has a little bit, just enough to be like, I can nudge this thing and get free while he's off the train. So I don't know. That's my theory.
All right.
So I don't think it was just a mechanical accident. I don't think it was Suplee definitely fucked up.
Yes.
But I don't think it was just that. In Top Gun, Tony Scott makes vehicles very cool.
Yes.
We have, of course, the fighter jets, but we get motorcycles and aircraft carriers and sports cars, and just like they all look fucking cool. And Unstoppable, he makes them scary.
He does. I mean, yeah. In fact, I can't think of another Tony Scott movie where you're frightened by the vehicle in the way that you are here. I mean, obviously he knows how to do vehicles, but this is the only instance that I can remember where, this has a presence that's, scary.
Every time the train appears, the music changes, the vibe totally shifts. You know, the music gets dark, the sound effects get like really ominous. Mm-hmm. I was thinking, it made me think of Jaws almost, even though we see a lot of the train here.
Yeah.
Just like its presence, and like it's kind of like every time you see the train, it was kind of like that vibe of like, oh, there's the fin out there or something.
Yep.
You know, where it's like, oh, it's coming to get you. Like, it hasn't hit you yet, but it's coming and it's looking to hit something. You know.
Yep.
So yeah, it definitely makes the case for the train being like a monster, I think, with an agenda.
Yes.
But so I think this might be the greatest vehicle movie of all time, but not just because of the train. I think just the sheer volume and variety of the great vehicle work here is off the charts. We get police cars, fire trucks, ambulances out the wazoo.
Yep.
Probably the greatest pickup truck moment in movie history.
Yes.
at the end. Even before that, we see a cool one of those pickup trucks that rides on the train track.
Yeah.
You don't get to see one of those in every movie.
We also get a helicopter.
And no, we don't. We get so many helicopters.
I feel like before he died, Tony Scott was in a dick measuring contest with Michael Mann for who was better at putting helicopters next to other vehicles that weren't helicopters. And I got to give the trophy to Tony Scott here. He does it better. And
there's that one scene, the stunt, which I think Chris Pine may have even done himself, where he's like going between the two train cars, and he's like flipping a switch or something, and in the background is a helicopter below the level of the train, at ground level, while the train is like elevated. Yeah. You're like, what the fuck? And the train's moving. And, I know there was definitely some CGI involved. I don't know how real that shot was. Yeah. But I mean, all those helicopters, they're like just swarming around. Yeah. The main character of the movie, which is the train. And during the last 45 minutes or so of the movie, there's 2 or 3 helicopters in every single scene, in every single shot, almost every shot. And they're all shooting the movie too. Like they're all running film. Yes. And that's incredible. They're all like, oh, we're news helicopters. We got these cameras sticking. And you can see the cameras and they're like, yeah, they're just news helicopters. And it's incredible just to think about how they even fucking made this movie.
It's impressive. And the sense of speed that you get is pretty terrific. And with every movie where things are going fast, you know that when they made this, the vehicles are not moving that fast. But boy, this train really feels like it's moving fast.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, like it's moving fast. It's gonna do some damage. I do have a nitpick with this movie.
Okay.
The town of Stanton, Pennsylvania, in this movie. I don't know if you caught this. In the graphic they show on screen, it apparently has a population of 750,000 people.
Oh. No, it does not.
Well, first of all, Stanton doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's a fake town. But like, okay, I get it. Like, you're going to make up a town for a movie. I get it. Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah.
First of all, I think they do switch. They switch from northern to southern Pennsylvania in this movie at one point, and it happens really fast. You're like, wait a second. But anyway, Ned is in northern Pennsylvania when he starts, I think. But anyway. But if you're going to make up a town, that's fine.
Yeah.
You want to say like, hey, there's this town, and first of all, by the looks of it, it doesn't have more than 20 or 30,000 people in it.
Right. Even 75,000 would have been far-fetched for the
Yes.
way this town is characterized.
For the way
in
it
movie.
looks and the fact that nobody's ever heard. But like, you're going to try to tell me there's a third city in Pennsylvania with almost 1 million people about that I've never heard of? Like, come on. So yeah, that kind of stretched believability a little bit, but I'm going to give it to that.
Yeah, minor nit. But
minor nit.
decidedly a nit.
Yeah, I'm not gonna worry about that too much. But yeah, I think this is one of the greatest vehicle movies of all time by one of the greatest vehicle directors of all time. I love this movie. It's a great way to spend less than 100 minutes, and it's an incredible way to end a career for Tony Scott, who is one of my favorite directors. So definitely deserves a spot on the shelf for vehicle performances.
Well, I'm glad you picked it. This one's great. I have a nit of my own, and I'm curious how you feel about it. And it is the subject of shooting at a train. How do you feel about shooting guns at trains?
Well, it's a dumb thing to do. I don't think the movie endorses it. I think the movie is definitely going like, look at these idiots.
Yeah,
but that might have been something that happened in real life.
Yeah. If it really happened,
if the local cops in wherever Ohio where this apparently happened had done that, would you be that surprised?
No, I wouldn't be that surprised. No. And for that, I can forgive it because I could believe that in all of the attempts to stop this train, somebody had the idea to shoot a gun at it.
I would be really upset if it was like Rosario Dawson's idea, or even the guy that's in like the Pittsburgh home office. Mm-hmm. If it was his idea, that would be a problem. I'd be like, okay, that's not something those people would come up with.
Right.
But yeah, like the local cops in a rural town, I believe that.
Okay. All right. Well, I
don't believe it's a good idea. Don't do that.
Yeah. Don't shoot at a train.
Don't shoot at anything.
No, I agree. Well, great pick. Boy, Tony Scott, rest in peace.
You will be missed.
All right, well, I'm going to go with my second pick back to 1971. And my second film is Duel. So back to the box synopsis for this one. Traveling businessman David Mann angers the driver of a rusty tanker while crossing the California desert. A simple trip turns deadly as Mann struggles to stay on the road, while the tanker plays cat and mouse with his life. Tagline, the most bizarre murder weapon ever used. Questionable tagline, perhaps.
Yeah. I can think of some more bizarre ones.
Indeed. So my second pick is Steven Spielberg's first feature film.
I've been meaning to check this one out for a long time.
Oh yeah?
Well, obviously, it's Spielberg's first movie, but it's like been on my to-do list for so long, and I finally had the chance.
I'm glad you had a chance to watch it. This really couldn't be a more simple story. We open on our businessman traveling across the desert. 6 minutes into the movie, he passes this hulking big rig on the highway. The big rig passes him right back, and then he passes the big rig once more. The trucker lays on the horn, and our duel is underway.
It sure is.
Yeah.
Was this made for TV?
This was made for TV, and then it was expanded into a theatrical release for Europe. I don't know that it actually got a theatrical release in the States, but in fact, I'm pretty sure it didn't because critical reviews for this are decidedly few and far between. Yeah. But there is a longer version. There's like a 90-minute version that was released in Europe, and that's what's available today here in the store. But I think when it first released, it was like 74 minutes, which is a great length for a movie.
That's a great length for a TV movie.
So yeah, after the duel begins, our businessman spends the rest of the movie being relentlessly pursued by this 18-wheeler. We never see the driver. It's just this giant, filthy truck chasing him down. And in spite of the fact that the desert is vast, this guy just can't get away from the truck that's following him. So this is a part of the country where, there aren't a lot of interchanges or exits. It's just long stretches of highway that these two drivers are occupying at the same time.
Seems like he has some other options. I mean, he could always turn and go back the other way several times. I mean, yes, you don't want to have to do that, but also if you think your life is in danger, it's probably worth it.
Yeah. And he does employ some techniques to try and elude this trucker during the second half of the film. Like, I'm just going to sit, off on the side of the road and take a nap for a little while. And sure enough, the trucker is still waiting for him. But yeah, I agree. There could be other ways to get away from this guy, but I think this is pretty brilliant. I remember when we were talking about Drive a few episodes back, and you suggested that you could have watched the chase scene at the beginning of that movie for a full 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we get here.
It's pretty close.
It's a 90-minute chase scene, you know?
Yeah.
Very little in the way of dialogue. There's just one guy chasing down another guy. Spielberg decided to take this on because his secretary suggested this story to him after reading the story in a Playboy magazine.
Oh.
Yeah. Apparently, people do read it for the article. He cast this stunt driver named Kerry Lofton for the trucker. We don't actually see this guy, but Kerry asked Steven Spielberg what his motivation was for tormenting a car's driver, and Spielberg told him, "You're a dirty, rotten, no good son of a bitch." And Lofton replied, "Kid, you've hired the right man." So this was decidedly low budget. I think it was shot for like $450,000 over the course of 12 days. Already touched on the fact that it was made for TV before it was expanded into a feature. Believe it or not, Parker Brothers licensed this film for a board game, and it was actually released.
Wow.
And did not do well, which not surprising.
I mean, it's a TV movie.
Right. I don't know why it seemed like a good idea, but
hey kids, it was expanded to 90 minutes in Europe. Right. I mean, I guess it could be if it was a cool game.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, copies are a pretty scarce of the board game. So why did I choose this? Because it's tense as fuck. This movie is, a great reason not to give in to road rage. I love that there's like a sense of claustrophobia to this movie in spite of the fact that it takes place on the open road. I also think that truck has so much personality.
For sure. It was definitely a huge influence on Tony Scott in Unstoppable.
Yeah.
I feel like the face of that train was given a lot of that same personality.
Yeah. I think Steven Spielberg looked at half a dozen different big rigs for this, and he landed on the one that's in the movie. It's a Peterbilt truck because it kind of has a face to the front of the truck. But, in addition to that, it's mammoth, and it's covered in dirt and grime. It's always spewing exhaust.
It doesn't look real.
It feels evil.
It seems like it shouldn't be on the road.
Right.
I mean, even in 1971, it looks like it's decades old.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just doesn't belong. Yeah, it's just gross.
It is. It's totally gross. I remember seeing this when I was a kid, and it actually scared the bejesus out of me. You don't know why the truck driver has it out for this guy. He's just hell-bent on following him and torturing him. And, because you don't see the driver, the truck really becomes the villain. You spend a lot of time with the business person who's in the car, but you never see the truck driver. So it's really the truck that feels like it's chasing him down.
Do you think this is the truck driver that just kind of does this? He like picks out somebody and like, I'm going to get this guy?
It's funny because Spielberg offered some context that supports that theory. So, we see the front of the truck and it's covered in license plates. And Spielberg's take is, well, those represent, the other states where he's done this, which I feel like maybe, a little bit hard to connect those dots. But sure, it definitely seems like this is more fun and games for the truck driver than anything. So I could believe that he's done it before.
Had a little bit of the vibe of that Kurt Russell movie Breakdown.
Oh yeah,
a little bit where it's just like a thriller where people find themselves in a bad situation and then you just got to get out of it.
Well, it's funny because the Letterboxd review that I plucked for this by the user Big Rig, so perhaps somebody who's biased,
love trucks.
His review was quite literally Jaws before Jaws. So I think that there's a lot going on here that Spielberg returns to, and we definitely see in other films later on. But for 1971, it was pretty original. Definitely an ambitious debut. This averages a 3.8 on Letterboxd. Like I said, not a lot of critical reviews, but I've always loved this movie, so I'm glad we have a theme that's worthy of putting it on the shelf.
It's an illustration also of a different direction that Spielberg's career could have taken. Mm-hmm. If he had been interested in being a genre director or something, I think he would have been an amazing genre director.
Yeah, yeah.
He obviously took a much different path, but this is just a B movie made for TV, low budget, grindhouse like thriller.
Totally, yeah, and it works. I mean, for how little else is going on in this movie, it doesn't stop being entertaining, and it's tense from beginning to end. So credit to Spielberg, but if you haven't seen this, give it a shot. It's going on the shelf for vehicle performances.
It's definitely worth a rental. It's like I said, it had been on my to-do list for decades.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's worth watching.
Good. Glad you liked it.
Okay, I'm taking us to 1985 to a movie that's called Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
All right.
This movie is directed by Tim Burton. It was written by Phil Hartman and Paul Rubin.
Phil Hartman?
The Phil Hartman. The character of Pee-wee was developed by Paul Rubens and Phil Hartman.
I did not know that.
They were in the Groundlings. And Paul Rubens had developed this character. Phil Hartman was instrumental in that. He did some writing and whatnot. But yeah, they developed it together. And actually, did you know that Pee-wee Herman, the Pee-wee Herman show was like not for kids whatsoever?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Until this movie came out.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
No, the original Pee-wee Herman show was from the Groundlings, and it was like a show that they did, and eventually it was an HBO special. It was very adult.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
And then they eventually turned it into this movie, which was made into a kids movie, and then the TV show came out, which was a kids show, but like you could make the argument that maybe it shouldn't have been.
Oh yeah, I mean it definitely, yeah.
But a lot of that is from the fact that it was never meant for kids. It was like an adults improv show or something.
Wow, interesting bit of trivia.
That's where it came from.
That's all news to me.
Here's the back of the box. When eccentric man-child Pee-wee Herman gets his beloved bike stolen in broad daylight, he sets out across the U.S. on the adventure of his life. Huh. Tagline, the story of a rebel and his bike.
I was excited to go back to this because, I grew up with Pee-wee, and I have certainly seen this. But I remember watching Big Top Pee-wee far more often when I was growing up than Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of that, when you're a kid in the 90s and these aren't movies that necessarily were like current with, it's kind of just like what you run into, what videotape your mom rents.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of that happens. But this is the first Pee-wee movie, but it's also Tim Burton's first movie. I don't know if the bike is supposed to actually be cool.
That's a good question.
Everybody in this world wants this bike.
Yeah.
Legitimately.
Yeah.
They fucking love this bike.
Yeah, it's coveted.
And when I was young and I saw this movie, and I was very young when I saw it, but I knew that I didn't like the bike. I knew that it wasn't like a bike that I wanted.
Yeah.
But I also thought that, like, I guess because I was too young to realize that movies can just like straight up lie to you. But I was like, maybe it's supposed to be cool. So like, I thought that it was like supposed to be cool. There's too much shit on it though.
Yeah, it's wacky.
Yeah, it's got the lion thing in the front. It's got all the and I don't I like my bikes a little bit more simpler. Even when I was a little kid.
Mm-hmm. It's got the headlight.
Yeah. But whatever we think about the bike, it is the driving force of this plot. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the universe wants the bike.
Yes.
I found myself asking a few questions rewatching this movie. One of which is, who is Pee-wee?
That's a question. That's a great question. It's not one that I have an answer to.
I mean, is Paul Rubens playing Pee-wee? Is Pee-wee playing Paul Rubens? Pee-wee is credited in the movie as himself. Pee-wee Herman as himself.
Really?
But also, like, on a character sense, is Pee-wee a child who kind of imagines himself in an adult world, or is he an adult that's like permanently infantilized? Is he mentally challenged? I can't tell. But one thing that we know about Pee-wee in this world is that like nobody treats him like an outcast.
Right.
Kind of like you would expect, which is actually like different from a lot of Tim Burton's later movies where, especially like something like Edward Scissorhands, where it's like everybody hates him and he's a big outcast and even when they like him, he's kind of treated as like this freak. Whereas like this movie is like that's not how they treat Pee-wee. Like he seems to be a respected member of this community, even though he doesn't have a job.
Yes.
All the women in his life are like infatuated with him. At least one of the men in his life is. Another woman like threatens to rape him later on in the movie.
Right.
Like who is Pee-wee in this world?
When I think back to my time watching Pee-wee and what I appreciated about the show and the movies was that he always just struck me as an eccentric character who made it okay to be weird.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated
that.
Yeah, I appreciated this character for that reason.
I think going to Pee-wee coming to Pee-wee as a kid, like we both did, I don't think as a kid you kind of ask yourself those questions, like, what is this, what level of postmodernism is this,
Yeah.
Looking at it as an adult, it's like, who is Pee-wee, But you know what this is an insane thought, but who I was thinking about in relation to Pee-wee was The Rock.
Oh, wow.
And
really?
here's my thinking.
Yeah, help me with this.
So The Rock was Dwayne Johnson's character in wrestling, right? But Dwayne Johnson is always The Rock.
Yes.
He's never not The Rock. And if you think about wrestling, I don't know how much you know about professional wrestling, but there's this thing, there's this like edict that's called kayfabe. I think it's called kayfabe. I think that's how you pronounce it. That is kind of like you never admit that this is fake, And back in the old days before the internet, it was kind of understood that like even in the real world, you never admitted it. So like if you and this guy were having a fight in your wrestling league in the public, whatever, if you were out at a bar and someone asked you about that guy, you had to be like, fuck that guy. You know what I mean? Even if he was your friend, it was like this like understanding, like you never broke character ever at all times. Right.
Interesting.
And that's changed a little bit nowadays, where there's a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, and they never break character during the show or as the character.
Yeah.
And I feel like Rock is kind of like taken that, he's lived by that into his acting career. Like he's almost like he's never quite said like The Rock was just a character. Maybe he has, but like you never get that impression. Like he's always still kind of The Rock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He's the same character in every movie.
Yeah.
It's just The
But
Rock.
like he's The Rock.
He's The Rock.
And I feel like if he came out and was like, listen, The Rock was just like this bullshit character I'm playing, like that's not me. Like he's never done that to my knowledge. It would seem wrong if he did.
Yeah.
And the same thing, like I feel like with Pee-wee, where it's like he can never really admit that he's not Pee-wee Herman, right?
I'm inclined to agree, although I actually think that Paul Rubens veered further away later in his career from Pee-wee than The Rock ever has with his movies,
But I feel like when Paul Rubens is in a movie, it feels like Pee-wee Herman's playing a part.
Yeah.
like Pee-wee Herman grew up and became an actor.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that. I don't know. It's like it's almost like Paul Rubens / Pee-wee is playing this version of kayfabe where he's like, I can't really admit that I'm not like I am Pee-wee Herman.
Right.
I don't know. It's a weird relationship to reality to me. It also got me thinking about the perspective of this movie.
Yeah.
Whereas the movie I thought of in relation to that is like Home Alone. Whereas like Home Alone is this crazy story, right? Where this kid gets stuck home alone while his parents go to Paris, and then he fends off these criminals or whatever. But you can kind of imagine in the real world where this kid is stuck home alone for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And his parent, and then there's a creepy guy in the neighborhood and his parent, but in his head, like kids have crazy imaginations. And in his head, he's telling the story of how he fended off these guys and whatever. His parents are gone for days and yada, yada, yada. And so to me, that was always what Home Alone was. It was like this version of reality that Kevin Arnold had in his like child brain that like didn't make any sense and didn't actually happen. But in his vision of like what, But like, is that what's going on in this movie? I don't know that it is. Like, is the world skewed, or is it Pee-wee's? Is it a skewed perspective, or is it a crazy world?
Yeah, it's a good question because I feel like in the show we always existed in Pee-wee's world, and it was solely his world. It was divorced from reality. But you get a little bit more of the real world in this, and it's hard to know what's
because he's got that friend Francis who lives at home, is rich, and like, but still seems like a kid. But like when you're a 10-year-old kid, you kind of view your friends as adults, right? You don't think that you're kids. You're like, yeah, we're like, I have this cool bike and everybody wants it, and then I went on this great adventure, and but really what you did was you went down the road, around the neighborhood for 3 hours, and you told your friends this story about how like, oh, I went to Arizona and
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard to say. This movie doesn't make it clear whether this is like a real world or whether it's Pee-wee's perspective.
Yeah, it doesn't. I feel like Tim Burton has a lot to do with that in a way that he directs this, and it's one of my favorite Tim Burton movies because it just feels like nobody else could have done this.
No.
And it's rare that I appreciate what Tim Burton brings to the table as much as I do here, because a lot of times it feels too far off to one side, but yeah, Tim Burton was absolutely the right guy for this story and this character.
Yeah, he understood like how like genuine Pee-wee was. This movie's really funny. I wish Tim Burton would like go back to making comedies. I don't know if he can, to be honest, but this movie's really funny in a weird way. I guess that's probably more to do with Paul Rubens and Phil Hartman and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Tim Burton made some other funny movies later in his career.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the bike is like, important if it's not a great bike. I mean, it's a cool bike in the world. It's a great bike.
Yeah.
So I think it plays such an important part in Pee-wee's life, in the story. And I love this movie. It's a great Tim Burton flick, and I got to put it on the shelf for vehicle performances.
I'm glad you did. It feels like an essential pick for this theme, and I'm glad you plucked this one.
And if it's something you haven't seen since you were a kid, it definitely warrants a rewatch as an adult.
Well, great pick. I'm gonna round things out with my final choice. We're going to 2004 with my final pick, and it's Collateral. Back of the box, cab driver Max picks up a man who offers him $600 to drive him around, but the promise of easy money sours when Max realizes his fare is an assassin. Tagline: it started like any other night. So I'm wrapping things up with one of only 3 movies where Tom Cruise plays a villain.
Oh.
Yeah, the other 2 are Interview with a Vampire and Taps. This movie comes at a weird time in Cruise's career. So he had just come off of The Last Samurai, which is a movie that he never should have made. He goes on to do War of the Worlds, which was big, but follows that with a few unusual choices, including Lions for Lambs, Valkyrie, Night and Day. I don't think that we'd ever get a film like this from today's Tom Cruise.
He was, this was a period of his career that he was kind of grasping at, because he didn't know where he was going to go, because he hadn't quite gotten to the Mission Impossible.
Yeah, he hadn't figured out his brand yet, really,
And this is post-couch, right?
Yes.
So it's a weird moment for him.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I'm glad that we have this, because Tom Cruise is pretty good in this. I think that Michael Mann's direction has a lot to do with that. So one of the reasons that Michael Mann took this project is because he loved the script. He called it like the third act of a traditional drama. It doesn't go backward to offer more detail on these characters' lives. Instead, we're just catching them at this moment. This is definitely this is one of those, everything takes place within 24 hours, even less. A
lot of our movies tonight do that, actually.
Yeah, indeed. They do. Most of them do. So before this landed in Michael Mann's lap, it was briefly with Scorsese, Spielberg, and Spike Lee. Michael Mann,
all of that seems appropriate.
Yeah. Michael Mann definitely gives it some weight, though. He's really good with this type of story, which is very dialogue driven. There's a lot of this movie that we just spend in the cab with Jamie Foxx and Tom Cruise while they're talking back and forth.
Yeah.
We already discussed Cruise. Collateral also gives us Jamie Foxx, Jada Pinkett Smith, a nearly unrecognizable Mark Ruffalo. I think Jamie Foxx is especially good. He kind of plays the mild-mannered cab driver.
Oh, he's definitely the best part of this movie.
Yeah. I like him a lot.
This is like, you never expect a Michael Mann movie to be like a good hang. And you never expect a Tom Cruise movie to be a good hang.
No.
But somehow this movie is like a good hang.
Yeah.
And like Jamie Foxx is the only reason that makes sense, because like Tom Cruise, but he works, in that sense, but only because he's hanging out with Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx does a great job throughout his career of playing two types of characters. One who's a badass, unfuckwithable, and the other who's kind of like meek and mild-mannered, and that's the category he's in for this. And
he's like just a guy who's trying to get by, but also like capable.
Yeah, and somehow you believe him in this like just like average dude role, in spite of the fact that like we see him in like Django Unchained, and he's
right,
a completely different character,
total badass.
Yeah. So an important reason, and it's a story beat in this movie, and it's part of the reason that I chose this for tonight's theme, is that Max has this dream of starting his own limo company. He claims to have been saving for years to follow through with his dream. But there's something about driving the cab that's holding him back rather than helping him fulfill his dream. So Max takes a lot of pride in his cab, keeps it pristine. He also has this little picture of a tropical island in the visor. He uses it to kind of clear his head when he has annoying passengers. But the truth is, Max has gotten really comfortable with his job as a cabbie, and the cab has kind of become his comfort zone. It's the place and the thing that's actually keeping Max from the future version of himself that he hopes to achieve someday.
Well, okay. So, yes. That. But also, like, maybe he is just destined to be a great cab driver.
I mean, he's a phenomenal cab driver. Like that, you get a feel for that early on. Like the banter that he has with his passengers when they want to have it is like, yeah, this dude is exactly the type of Uber driver that I'd love to have.
But also, like, maybe the dream is like, I don't know. I can't tell if like, is that dream good to have, or is that dream like holding him back from like being a better cab driver? Saying just like, I'm going to be a better cab driver and that'll help me start my business or something.
See, I interpreted this as like he's hit the ceiling as a cab driver. He's as good as he can be. And it's not really a career that's ever going to like yield big money or anything like that. And the idea of becoming a limo driver and having his own fleet of cars is the way to take this thing that he's great at to the next level. But yeah, I mean, he's excellent as a cab driver, and what I like about the role that the cab plays in this is that when he crashes the cab, and that happens at a point in this movie, he's been kind of held hostage by Tom Cruise's character, and after chauffeuring Cruise to various destinations, he totals the car. When that happens, Max's character definitely changes in the movie. He's suddenly like more in control. There's nothing holding him back. It's like something has been unlocked, and now Max is ready to like, take charge of his role in this story and potentially his life. It feels like
maybe that was also an acknowledgement too, that he was like, hey, this cab is part of my life. I'm pretending for the last 12 years that this isn't my job. When really it is his job. And he's like, you motherfucker, you fucked up my cab.
Yeah.
And that was like the first time he took ownership of it.
Yeah.
This is my job.
Right. So, I do love the time that we spend in that cab, and a lot of the banter between Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx is pretty great. A few interesting casting notes on this. So Edward Norton actually auditioned for both roles, and I think he could have played both roles.
Yeah, I could see that.
Beyond Norton, Adam Sandler was considered for the role of Max. Russell Crowe, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Colin Farrell were all up for the role of Vincent. And eventually went to Cruise. What do you think of Tom Cruise in this part?
I think he's good. I think I like him as a villain because I like not liking him.
Yeah. It's easy.
Yeah.
I like it too. I think they landed on the right guy. I could see all of those other actors playing this part. Maybe not Leonardo DiCaprio, but
I mean, if you get the right two actors, it would work.
Yeah.
You just got to get the right two actors. I think it's a good script. It's a good story, good concept.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you hit on something important. I mean, chemistry is important in this type of movie because it's really just these two guys that we spend most of the movie with.
You need chemistry with the two leads and the director. And as long as you get those three things are working together, that's all that matters here.
I agree.
Even if one of those people is Tom Cruise.
Right. So critical response was pretty positive here. Ebert loved it, calling Jamie Foxx's performance a revelation. This is essentially a movie about a long conversation between a killer and a man fearing for his life. And I think Ebert is right that Fox plays this part really, really well.
Was he new at this point? Because, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't remember. 2004, you said?
Yeah, 2004. I don't remember a lot of Jamie Foxx before this. This was definitely one of his bigger parts for the.
Yeah.
I don't think he was quite as much of a leading man
Gotcha.
Prior to this.
So maybe it was a revelation.
Yeah. So Letterboxd user Matt Lynch called this Michael Mann's My Dinner with Andre.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. It's not a bad comparison. So yeah, I think it's perhaps a less expected final pick for vehicle performances, but I love the role that the vehicle plays on like the development of this character for Jamie Foxx, and so yeah, I'm throwing it on the shelf for a final vehicle performance pick.
That's a good vehicle. Cabs are a necessary vehicle in our world.
They are.
And we need cab drivers, at least for the time being.
Indeed. Well, listen, as always, thanks for paying a visit to Rewind Video. This week, the staff recommendation shelf will get you where you're going with 6 terrific vehicle performances. The films we chose are Judgment Night, Christine, Unstoppable, Duel, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and Collateral.
You can find us on pretty much all the social networks. Just look us up. So like, subscribe, and whatnot. Also, get on our mailing list at rewindvideopod.com. And if you like the show, be kind, recommend it to a friend.
That does it for this week's episode. Next time, tune in as we tackle movies adapted from books.
Ooh, I like reading.
Who knew that movies could be adapted from books?
I knew that, actually, yeah.
Okay. As always, we'll have 6 movies to recommend, but of course, we're always interested in what you think, so don't hesitate to hit us up on social. In the meantime, feel free to stop by the counter for a movie to watch, and we will see you next time.
Hail Satan.